I go to the search. Patch Quest. So it's in the playlist called Dio Evaluation and Feedback. 1 year ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 years ago. So probably a little over 2 years ago, we first started playing and talking to Lemon about this game called Patch Quest. And as you can see in this top video, it was a turn-based roguelike light thing. And then it changed into twin stick, so I call it twin stick time. And Patch Quest dev interview. This is just talking to Lemon, highlighting Patch Quest version 4, part 2, part 1. And we also have, let me see, what is it called? What is this called? We also did a PAX EGX video interviewing Lemon about Patch Quest, which you can find right here. The patchy journey, but a quest nonetheless. Talking about the long journey of both watching Patch Quest change over time and also Lemon's personal account of how he struggled as an indie developer, as most indie developers should and do, to get to where he is today and all the lessons that he learned. So this is the conclusion. The game is out on Steam. It's early access. You can play it right now, buy it $20. And the Discord for the last week has been diving deep into it. Now, normally we do a game breakdown service, and we do it all in one stream session. 1 second. Wow, sneezing. But normally we do it all in one stream session. So we meet with the developers, we play the game live, and we talk about it. But since Patch Quest is a little bit further along, it's a little bit more meaty of a game package, we're doing a asynchronous long form kind of deep dive, and that's what we've done so far. So this is just going to be a stream to wrap up a lot of what we went through this week. I can show you on our Discord channel that we do daily challenges all the time. I'll just do this, and close this. We do daily challenges all the time. So in the last week, we had people download Patch Quest, play it for themselves, stream it to the Discord. It was all about posting your observations and thoughts about the game. That's always a really good way to start any deep dive or any analysis. And games are meant to be played, and you are a player as well, so it's always good to start from that perspective. Then we made tier lists. We made tier lists about enemy strengths. We made tier lists about enemy puns and enemy names and all kinds of things. You can see our progress here. We post all of our results of Patch Quest into the daily challenges chat channel. But here are some of our tier lists. I ranked the monsters that you can ride in the game in terms of like offensive and defensive effectiveness. Marcus ranked their puns. Tony ranked their cuteness. And Akamarak ranked their visual design. So there's lots of different ways to approach understanding a game, and certainly by taking multiple people and doing a communal approach, we hit it from many different angles, many more than you're typically used to in any given YouTube video, game analysis, or written review. So that's part of the benefit of working with the community. That's part of the benefit of design oriented, and that's why I like doing this so much. So on the next day, third day, we talked about level design. So we had people either watch a video or play the game and snag screenshots of distinct level challenges. And then after that, we talked about suggestions, right? Like, what would you change and why? And after about 4 days of doing this, now on our final day, I want to recap some of the interesting things that we talked about, some of the interesting things that we covered. So let me just pull this up. And if anyone is on the chat with me, you guys can jump in and say hi as well.
No.
Hi. I'm not logged into Twitch right now. Give me a moment.
Not on Twitch. I don't care about Twitch. So breakdown. Design-oriented.net. So if you're curious about who we are and what we do, this is our website. You can go to designoriented.net, but the thing that we're doing now, it's called our Game Breakdown service. It's a consulting service where we offer developers. We offer 2 game developers. Each session is hosted in a virtual space and blah, blah, blah. And you get this nifty, handy-dandy spreadsheet as part of your takeaway. This is where everybody who is part of our design-oriented consulting team, we put all of our thoughts and answers here. So like I said before, we started with our observations, and we have collectively collected over 100 observations. And this also includes the questions that Lemon most wants answered by our analysis. So we will go over those soon. But after the observations, we have, let me do this. We have design space, right? So this is an interesting little sheet here in which we categorize different groups or sets of elements within the game, and then we denote different categories or attributes, and then we fill out the design space as we see fit. It's only by being organized that you can really tackle a game really of any complexity, but for this this game, certainly there's over 30 monsters that you can ride, many different mechanics, many different things going on, and this is a lot of comparisons to think about, especially in a game like this where some of your abilities will be stacked. Sometimes you'll run into some elements and sometimes you won't. It's really important to get sort of an organized, abstract view of how all of these elements interrelate. So we did one on macro strats, which includes, when you're navigating the world map, what encourages you to fight monsters, run from monsters, switch mounts, go mountless, backtrack, choose one path versus another, return to base, or choose one biome over another. These are the important decisions that you make when looking at your map like this, right? And because Patch Quest is complex, there's many other elements, including promoting combat, collecting, promoting the use of passive skills, and when, based on what action you do, when do you get the payoff? Is it an immediate payoff, medium, or long term? All these are important things to consider. Enemies, there are many regular, elite, king, and jumbo, and they all do different things in terms of how they shape combat encounters. And one of the most important categories for our analysis, this is one that Lemon was curious about most, but it all boils down to combat variety. And we created this system to break down what it actually means to have combat variety. Different ways to move, different ways or reasons to shoot, charging, using your melee attack, using your mount's defensive skill, or one of the 2 offensive skills, attacks really. How you aim, how you lasso and pull things, how you lasso and circle things, reasons to wait or to dodge without firing back, and to switch target selection from one target to another, right? So we looked at many different systems and elements in the game, from the way you have infinite ammo, mount attacks, enemy waves, frenzied enemies, all these particular elements and how they encourage a variety of these responses, including the perks, which are these green power-up and upgrade elements, right? When you unlock perks in the game, what do they actually encourage you to do? And you can see there's like big white space here. Most of the perks don't encourage you to do much, and there's a chunk of them that are all about the lasso, pulling, circling. So it's just a really interesting sort of abstract, high-level way to really extract some insights on what it means to play Patch Quest. And the next day we covered level design. And for a procedurally generated roguelike game like this, it's hard to actually talk about level design, despite the fact that there are randomized pieces shuffled around inside of its randomizer. We plucked out a few level elements and did a breakdown here on what's in them and how it works and so on. But we're at the conclusion of all this, and one of the most interesting takeaways, especially for a designer, is what the suggestions are. Because we can all play a game, we all have our thoughts and opinions, but it's really a challenge to a designer or any consultant to come up with something that actually fixes the problems. So here's a short list of all the problems that we identified. Patch Quest being a game that has pretty cluttered visuals, unclear or missing feedback at times, disengaging with challenges. People often run from a lot of challenges, having too small of a fidelity for what actions they're requiring you to do, lacking combat variety, lacking gameplay idea variety, that's level design. Complexity is too dense, offense is too powerful, too much overlapping in design space, empty, boring, backtracking. Yeah. Power up upgrades are too subtle, the effects are too subtle, difficult to predict interactions, drawn out, flat pacing, accidental execution of certain moves and mechanics. The consistency of rules, I should say inconsistent rules, but lacking meaningful macro decisions, emphasizing the journey over the world, and players tend to avoid escape game challenges. That's kind of what we said here, disengaging within the challenges. Okay, cool. So we got about 100 different suggestions, but each one of these, as you can see with the color coding, are addressing different parts of the game, and each of them are suggested in order to fix or address a very specific design problem. Now, this is not just us going, wouldn't it be cool if? This is us going, oh, we've played the game, we've identified something that doesn't work so well, and now we're trying to pinpoint exactly what little thing can change or big thing that can change in order to address that issue. So, yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride. Right here, if I do one of these, boop, this, and filter for lemon, we get all of Lemon's questions, which are highlighted here in blue. So I thought we'd take this stream to, give our final thoughts on Patch Quest and also address some of these major questions and kind of point the conclusion of our analysis in the right direction. So, taking it from the top and going down, how quests can be shrunk to a 15 or 30 minute average length without redesigning the world map. So, Bleach and Marcus, based on that question, what does that make you think?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it says, can a quest be shrunk to a 15 or 30 minute sprint without redesigning the entire world map? Part of the problem, as Lemon identified, is that some runs just last way long. And when you get a lot of perks and a lot of upgrades, sometimes you just don't die. So part of the question is, oops, don't do that. Part of the question is, what do you think can be done in order to create a much more compact, more quickly experienced game?
I might not know everything about Patch Quest, so this might not work, but basically reducing the scope of the world map and keep it small, keep the goal within reasonable reach, and it would make, I think the existing map is static, right? It never changes.
The corridors don't change, but the content within them are shuffled.
So it kind of feels like you could kill two birds with one stone by having the maps be smaller and procedurally generated, so that each playthrough is not only unique themes, but also play for 30 minutes.
So part of the challenge is without redesigning the world map.
Oh.
So the thing is, some runs in Patch Quest end relatively quickly, and some, when you're doing well especially, can last a long time. Games like Geometry Wars also have this problem, where the better you do, you're just kind of doing the same thing, and at some point you don't want to give up because you've gotten this far, but yeah, it's part of the challenge.
It's difficult when Patch Quest is part Metroidvania, since we're like, well, those games aren't short.
Those games are
the
what?
Shortest Metroidvania.
Oh, short.
Those games aren't short. What's like the shortest one, like an hour?
Maybe in 60 seconds. It's 60 seconds, Mark.
Yeah, that one.
Old indie game that we.
So like, if you're gonna make people go out, wild places, and then backtrack, it's always gonna be non-trivial amount of time. I was almost gonna say like space is always gonna be a problem. So could navigate that with teleports, but this is a general concept like be like uh, Spelunky. Spelunky is only 4 floors, but and you can get to the ending and beat it. But then special endings, ultimate endings require you to plumb the depths of each level
Hmm.
much more so than would otherwise to extend your playtime. So that at any point when you're playing in Patch Quest in this new style, they're like, oh, time to go beat the 4 bosses, beat the game, Breath of the Wild style.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get the true ending or special upgrade or special mount, you're like, oh, you have to plumb the depths of the levels like you're doing in these runs that are taking so long.
Yeah, so that kind of gets at one of the core uh, things that are unique about Patch Quest, but also one of the core problems. This game, as it's described on the Steam page or the website, is the only. I'm gonna read a quote. Lychee Games Patch Quest. Patch Quest, the only monster riding jungle crawler. And the Steam page itself has a longer description, but essentially, Patch Quest is a game that takes a lot of elements from a lot of different genres, and much like a patchwork, much like the patchy metaphor, kind of sticks them all together, and this is the result, right? This is why design is so much harder than just picking things that work well independently. You have to figure out how they work well together. So, in this case, it's like, am I feeling risky? Of course. Of course. Let's just max this stuff out. Let's see. I said max it out.
So those games you mentioned,
Mhm.
Geometry Wars and Spelunky and other things, I really don't like those kinds of games. I don't like how long they take. I don't like how almost mindless they become in some ways sometimes. I can't see myself enjoying a super long run of Patch Quest. So we can't redesign the map. What is your? Did you have a suggestion for how you were going to change that?
Yeah, so when you put elements together, a little bit from shooters, top-down shooters, a little bit from roguelikes, a little bit from Metroid or adventure games, you also get some of their cons, or there's a lot of subtle elements that you need to put along with it in order for those things that you took to really shine. In this case, the map is just open, and because it's open, the pacing of the experience is kind of up and down. Sometimes you go a long stretch of just the same kinds of encounters without finding a shrine, a dungeon, or some kind of mini boss, and that's like a 30-minute sort of sprint into what feels like nothingness, right? But if you look at some of these other games, they have smaller objectives, and the smaller objectives are things that can be achieved without resetting the whole run, right? When you're in Zelda, you're just moving around. If you want to collect stuff, you just do it. And you don't have to go back to base or stop or die first in order to sort of do that. So Patch Quest, in order to create smaller runs, they could use some kind of a quest system where you have micro objectives and you go out into the world in order to complete them. And that could allow the game to put a focus on a lot of elements that aren't just combat driven. Like, what if a micro objective was to get this shrew that I'm riding from this point of the stage into another point of the stage, like all the way across the map? That means you have to worry about stamina. That means you can't get hit. That means you might have to put some shrew food along the way. By the way, here's the shrew food. It likes weeds and soapy things, right? So you have to put some weeds along the way to keep your stamina up. Like, that's a whole sort of mini quest adventure that's kind of carved out of the existing systems.
But yeah, that idea, the very idea, pushes against the idea of a roguelike, which is basically a battle against the odds, trying to survive and run the race, right? Roguelikes are very linear in that aspect. You're going down floors and down floors and down floors, and this is very non-linear. It's very open. So like those two things naturally conflict, and there is no resolution to that. You just have to basically make different game modes that share the same. Oh, that guy just shot me in the face. Different game modes that share the same space. And another problem with roguelikes, right? The weird part about borrowing multiple genres, you can't save and quit typically your progress in a roguelike. You certainly can't save and load, even if you can suspend and resume. So that's why the emphasis on a run and run length are a little bit more difficult to get around than it is with other games. Other games, you have a dungeon that's long, you have a short, whatever. They just stop playing or pause and resume later. But this game is different. So all the little conventions, all the little expectations, all the little design pressures are starting to add up. And when you put it all together, something has to be stronger than the rest. And in this case, the roguelike elements are stronger than the adventure elements. Oh, night has fallen. I am dead. Get off me! It's interesting how the black bullets can't be quit getting that guy. The black bullets can't be canceled unless you use your lasso. No, I just lost him again. Woo! That was crazy. A bunch of bullets came at me, but yeah. So there isn't a simple answer for that. The quest is an unbounded experience as it stands in Patch Quest. When people go out, they can actually self-select what things they want to do. And I mentioned this before. Like if I go out on a run, I can decide just to collect animals. I can go out and try to get specific pins that I need to 100% things or to collect certain power-ups. I can go and just try to terraform the environment, moving plants from one area to the other to make it easier to play or harder or more interesting. And those are all player created, right? So when I was going out to get pets, sometimes the quests were literally 1 minute. You go to the first patch, you grab the first animal, and then you take it back to the base. But sometimes when I'm going for this big boss challenge in the top left, like this takes... This takes 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes just to get here and have enough strength to kind of do battle. So you can't make your ultimate quest one that's short. The only thing that would affect that is building shortcuts into your world and be like, cool, once you do this, you hop over here, you hop over there, and you can get to the end boss relatively quickly. But then that's still just one linear path in a much more open, multi-directional kind of world map. So yeah, I don't think those two things have a resolution. The more you try to put in elements that fix that problem, the more you're just making another mode anyway. And we've talked a little bit about what additional modes Lemon might do. So we'll move on to the next question. Is there a way to encourage moving and repositioning in combat beyond just circle strafing? All right, what are your thoughts, guys?
About this before. What was it? It was when I was mentioning Nex Machina, possibly. Some of it had to deal with your traditional shmups have the inability to circle strafe in a traditional shmup meant that the bullet patterns came at you in such a way where you had to be locked in the corridors momentarily, so you couldn't just move it's a particular type of dodging that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my earlier comment. Yeah, and something like Nex Machina. Um, the enemies are, at least the base enemies, follow you, or trying to chase after you. So, when they're chasing you, you know where you are, and because you know where you are, you know where they will be. So, small jukes and things mean that if they shoot a bullet at you, the juke would dodge the bullet, right?
Yeah.
So, that's why juking and staying in place is very important, or can be very important in Nex Machina, because basically a lot of little things facilitate it. Patch Quest is rather wild and can be super wild. So like and that's the other thing. Yeah, having having actual level design and particular enemies coming at particular levels in all these other games allows you to learn them, so you can do a particular strat, which is something like bob and weaving and microspacing. We're talking about circle strafing is a general strat that you can apply everywhere almost all the time. And then the games, the game not allowing you to learn any particular instance because it can be pretty random means that you're going to do the general strategy more often than not. So yeah, I think what we said, like level design and particular placements of enemies is a good way to encourage non-circle strafing all the time.
Yeah. So, there's a big boom in roguelike games and procedural generation, and it kind of started with Spelunky in the indie space, and it's everywhere now. And a lot of developers pick it because it's more programmatic, it's more easy to make a lot of content without having to hand author things, right? They like that. It gives the illusion that there's a lot more sort of variety when it's usually much, much less, right? And it's all for the reasons you were saying. To get specificity, which is what people love about life, right? It's like, oh, he did a backflip just to dodge right under that laser and then jumped up and kicked the rabbit in the teeth. You're like, well, that's very specific, right? So in order to get that scenario to happen, you need to be able to do flips, you need to have some dodges, you need to have rabbits, and you need to have teeth, and then you got to try to set it up to where that's actually the right thing to do or an important thing to do. That's cool. So we, along with our stories, right? Specificity is how we learn more about the world and how we gain control over the world. Details. And details that matter in a specific way, in a specific order, happening at a specific time to specific people. There's nothing that you can generate that kind of meaning, that kind of quality from just randomized elements. It just doesn't happen. That's why the best poems in the world aren't Mad Libs. Mad Libs are not...
Backwards?
Huh?
What'd you say, aren't backwards?
Aren't Mad Libs, where you just fill in
Okay.
the blank and then just pop in a poem and you're like, great, this is the best poem ever. Like, no, it's just random words. It's just random words. So there's a problem, right? If you want the player to encourage more things, including different gameplay strategies, but also to engage with different ideas in your level design, you need control. You need authoring, you need specifics, and you need consistency, you need reliability, right? So players can be like, cool, I learned this thing and I know I can always use it here and here. It's really discouraging to do a lot of work learning something and then not even get a chance to use it, like, ever, because of randomness or whatever. What did I describe? Learning Kirby and Smash like that. You can learn all these hats, right, for all the different enemy types in the game and take their powers, but then you can't control what your opponent plays, so you can't control whether or not you'll ever, in tournament at least, be able to show that off. I'm gonna die. So yeah, there are things to do to change up the combat. The first step is, enemy design, right? If all the enemies move the same and they attack you roughly the same and all the rooms are roughly the same, they're these boxes, you're already like limiting a lot of the tools that you have in order to create different experiences. But if you only had to tweak one, enemy design would be a really good way to do that. And we came up with some suggestions that do just that. But I'll have to read them in a second. Get away from me. Like, for example, going back and playing these dungeons is a kind of a cool thing for a mini mission. And when you're riding these boss enemies that you kind of wrangle down and circle, if I quit the game now, which I might, you get this boss version of the enemy as part of your pets. So, like, watch. Boop. So if I do this and I do this, return with pet, right? So if you want people to have shorter quests and shorter sessions, running out to get each boss enemy and take them back is a very like direct target, direct goal, and finish, direct finish like this. And it's, see how it has a golden crown for Kragnet? It means I went and got the boss version. And you see how these other guys don't necessarily have the crown? I don't even like you, Tarantula, anymore. I don't even like you. Boom. Kragnet King. So yeah, like understanding how people already play your game and accentuating that, meeting them halfway and trying to build something that points in that direction, I think that's the important part. I can't believe the dungeon tiles here with the dark brown don't like flash and give you a tile bonus. It made me so sad. I felt this whole thing up with dungeon tiles. But yeah, so let's take a quick look at our suggestions for enemy design. So we can just do this, 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 this. So a lot of these, we have some from Tony, some from Jeff, and some from me. So I said enemies can have a hunker down AI protocol. This means that they would find a spot, stop moving, and launch attacks or do other things from where they are. This will help make obstance courses, that's not even a thing. Obstacle courses of enemies, instead of enemies just running directly at the player all the time, right? So that's what Marcus was talking about. Sometimes when the enemies just trail you, you get this habit of running away and shooting behind you. But if the enemy hunkers down and they keep shooting bullets, it creates a pattern. And those patterns are a much different kind of obstacle to get around. And it also increases the readability of the pattern. It increases the predictability, and therefore the kind of strategies the player will engage with if they see something stable, right? Currently in patch codes, everything's moving, and even when a boss shoots out a pattern, they're moving while shooting it, and you're like, this is insane. Another idea: create hard counters with enemy design. Enemy shields that must be lassoed is an example. So I can just do this. So yeah, like the game has a core set of mechanics that are rarely used outside of shooting, moving, and mount skills, right? But there's lassoing, and then there's melee attacks, and if you treat those like legitimate pillars of combat, then it makes sense to have enemies that also kind of play into those core abilities. So if you had an enemy that had a shield, and you had to pull off the shield first, you know, classic Zelda kind of stuff, that would create interplay, and interplay creates depth, and depth helps you shape gameplay ideas, right? Like, there's a lot that you can do there. Melee only, lasso only, shoot only, mount only, like all kinds of things, right? Create enemies that must be melee attack to defeat or break shield. Enemies that require lasso pull to open themselves up for damage. All these ideas I just said. Enemies that don't shoot at you. So like these are like enemy environments. Monsters that get angry or plant their feet to reduce your lasso meter. Now you have to run an extra lap. Critters or monsters that throw out solid blocks or rocks that can slide around or be pushed by projectiles. Mount this monster so you can spawn your own rock at will. monsters that respond more defensively when they get grabbed by your lasso. Yeah, he's just playing up the lasso, kind of the lasso mechanics, right? It's probably one of the most fun aspects of the game. I guess like launching mount skills and doing the ring around the rosy with the lasso while dodging bullets. It's one of the most unique aspects of gameplay, but also turns out the most fun. So playing up those things would definitely be more interesting. Monsters with bullets that do no harm but act as solid objects. These bullets may land on the ground before phasing out or shrinking to the ground, or these bullets shots can be fired in a line to create walls. Tony came up with a poacher, a rival counterpart human that travels around the map and is a mini boss. That's kind of like the roaming enemies in Mario Bros. 3 world map. And we have some boss ideas later, but you can see that just some small changes to enemy AI and just prioritizing counters or interplay with the other mechanics can open up a whole sort of dimension of variety. And that's just kind of one of the many things that we addressed. Talk about hard and soft counters and talk about combat depth. You see it right there. The next question, do any of the mechanics need to be unlocked later to reduce complexity for new players? Examine complexity pushed on new players and examine the difficulty curve. So what do you guys have to say about that? New players, how does the game feel to them?
Yeah, Bleach.
My brain hurts.
Was the game overly complicated when you first played it, or did you just kind of move and shoot? What do you think, Bleach?
There wasn't a whole lot of depth or anything interesting going on, but there was a ton of stuff going on. I had a lot of questions early on. I didn't know how to mount. I didn't know what colors were referring to what. I don't even know if I knew what my goal was or where I was going. I was playing co-op with you, so I was just following you around.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot. So Bleach is like me, yeah. I also co-op. I was just shooting the last one, which is the game. So not too confusing, right?
Yeah.
High level stuff. I'm not able to speak about because I didn't get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things that Lemon correctly identified, his old version of the game, one, wasn't deep. It was just confusing and dense, and two, wasn't much of a game. You just kind of move around and try not to die. But he realized, if I pick a gameplay genre that's really easy for people to understand, which is twin stick shooters, then he can build the game on top of that, and that's what he did. So no matter how complex things get, you see a bullet coming at you, you move out of the way. You see an animal mount that you want, you go after it, and that's pretty much 80% of the game, I guess. So I don't think there's any problem with new players and complexity. Some very basic things that everybody knows how to do is uncover every square of the map, and if there's a dungeon, beat every sort of challenge you come across, and doing that gets you most of the way through the entire game, and it's going to take you a while too. There's a lot of squares on the map. So yeah, I just don't think complexity is an issue for new players, at least not for seasoned gamers like we tend to be. Is there any more design space for making corridor obstacle courses more interesting? So it's interesting how he's looking for more things he can do in the corridors. It's crazy. Like I could show you a rough equation for how to calculate depth. Let me just go to here, Critical Gaming, old blog. Right here, interesting choices and interesting gameplay. It's an old blog series where I talked about what makes games interesting and broke down the famous quote, "A game is a series of interesting choices," and went from there. So we go to complexity emergence, and we talk about depth from complexity and evaluating combat and interesting choices. And in this series, I think it's part 6. Part 6. We go over the elements that make up this really simple to understand equation for what makes games deep. And if I do this, that's fine. But you need your game to have variables or properties that define the gameplay interactions. If your game only has one property, it is just a property on the screen. If you have 2 properties, you can make things that are this or that. And if you have more and more variables, you can continue to further define what things are and how they interact. So, you need to have mechanics or you don't even really have a game, but it gives the player control and choice. So being able to do something to some of the elements, usually controlling your player character, and then the things that you do affecting other things in terms of properties or whatever, that's basic. You need dynamics. This connects various properties, variables, and mechanics to complicate the emergent web of interactions, right? So when Mario jumps and his character position hits a block and the block's above him and he's still going up, the block breaks. If he's Super Mario, like property, positional property, condition, result. Like that's what dynamics are, the rules that connect those different elements, actions, and resulting actions. And this is what gameplay is all about, changing things and things that change because you do things. But finally, interplay allows for changes in the direction of gameplay. So with interplay, entire functional strategies, what I used to call lines of motion, can be stopped, redirecting gameplay into another direction. So one thing that we were talking about with Lemon is, hey, how do you stop players from just moving a circle and just doing what you might call a dominant strategy? But this is the answer, interplay. You have to have something in there that stops the dominant strategy, and by doing that, we'll put focus on the other elements, the other properties, the other mechanics, the other scenarios, and the best way to do that is just with a nice, clear, hard counter, all right? But part of this article series, we crunched a few of the numbers and just kind of thought about how many emergent possibilities there are when you have, very little variation or very little properties, very little mechanics, and then this and that, and we slowly walk it up in complexity as a thought experiment. But the big takeaway is you need interplay in order to define things, in order to have the resulting actions be distinct and meaningful. You need to have the properties, but then you need to have the player affect those things with interplay. Stopping something from happening or making something happen is the easiest way to understand that. So as far as Patch Quest goes, there's plenty of design space to make the corridor obstacle courses more interesting. But as we said before, it's all about conveying ideas, specific ideas, highlighting specific systems and rules and interplay and variables that you put into the game. For example, let's just pop in the game, show you what I'm talking about. Yum, good. So right here, these floor traps are floor traps. They're green, you can barely see them, and when you step on them, crazy stuff happens, right? So that's a unique level element. It's also, you could consider it to be an enemy element, or you consider the spikes enemy elements, and these are just level elements that trigger them, whatever. There's water over here that you can drown in. There's obstacles. There's a lot going on even on the screen. But just because they are in the stage and on the screen doesn't mean too much. There needs to be some kind of interplay, whether it's soft or hard, that gets me to either notice these things, pay attention to them, or factor them into my strategy. So if you're just kind of moving along like this and you're just moving, you might ignore them or not even know what's happening. But we'll get to a section coming up where it makes a big difference. Okay, so here. So this area compared to the other area has spiders' webs, right? And these spiders' webs, that guy just made Kagebushins. Okay. We'll leave that area. But yeah, you can see that if there's an element and it just comes and goes and it's not really the focus of the level or the environment, it's easy to just move on and forget entirely. A lot of Mario levels theme themselves after very specific things. They say, hey, riding on top of ghosts. And you're like, whoa, this whole level's about riding on top of ghosts. And that doesn't mean every challenge has to feature ghosts, and it doesn't mean that every single thing has to be about riding. But it focuses your attention, it focuses the design, and it also focuses the player's attention to something that they can understand and look out for, as long as you can make it distinct, which is why you build your levels around the things that you have and not around just random ideas. So the bulk of this game is combat. The bulk of it is shooting things and running away from things, and there's not much meaningful you can do to the environment outside of that. I hate you, owl. Your random movements. Stop it. So like, if you just didn't happen to go up, if you just randomly went down, you can ignore those things altogether, and if you just keep moving, you know, they don't make much of an impact. So we had a lot of suggestions on how to build out levels, but ultimately it comes back to that hand authoring content and figuring out what's interesting and then trying to highlight it through design, through soft encouragement, and also through specific challenges that must be done, and balancing those things. So how I was actually supposed to capture that monkey? Where's that monkey? So that monkey has the ability called light feet, and that means that when it steps on traps, it doesn't trigger the trap, it just steps nimbly over them without... Yeah, I'll show you. Okay, I'll go back. So this is a perfect example of a really individual property that you can find in the menu, on the enemies. In the side menu, it says light feet. You won't trigger pressure plate traps. There's only a few pressure plate traps in the whole game, but they're in the section that the monkey lives, and now you can just walk over them and ignore them completely. You may not even have known they were pressure plate traps if you just happened to capture a monkey first. That's just how it goes sometimes. But it's hard for a game like this to take a detail like that and really make it to where the player not only discovers it, understands it, but also engages with it and enjoys the whole process from start to finish, right? Are there any traps in here? Nope. This one has the spider webs again. And I'll ring this gong to stop all the enemy bells, or all the enemy bullets, and move on, right? So we just moved through a bunch of green sections, and I can remember a couple of elements from them, but they didn't make like a very distinct, clear idea. Level design is one of the hardest aspects of all of game design. It's super complicated. It kind of requires understanding a lot about how players learn, how they think. There's a little bit of storytelling. It's really complicated. Just like writing essays and writing in general is complicated. You're communicating ideas from scratch. Cool. So let's see if there's any more traps. No. No traps. Wait a minute. Okay, we're getting there. So yeah, let's go to the next question. Mini boss design help, broad ideas for attacks, right? This is a similar question, like how can Limit take what he already has and expand it gameplay in a meaningful way, right?
I didn't come up with any new attack. Not me. Nope.
So, some of the things that Tony and I were thinking about towards the end of yesterday was right here. I will do this and make it a little bigger. So how about this idea, Hypnomoth chain, Hypnoth. So there's an enemy in this game that creates a chain that latches onto another enemy and makes that enemy invincible. And you kind of have to attack and kill the chain starter in order to then remove the invincibility from the thing it's attached to. So Tony had an idea, like, I wonder how many things can chain. Can one chain into one that's chained into one that's chained into one? That's a really cool idea. Don't even know it's possible, but it's also, if I saw that in the game, it would be really memorable. So he decided to turn that into a boss idea. It just says a fight where a chain of hypnots are connected to each other and you have to break the chain apart. That's a really cool sounding idea, especially if the bullet patterns of the moths were not too dense, so that when they're all chained up and they're all firing on rhythm or whatever, you get this really neat like macro pattern, emergent pattern. But then when you start breaking the chain, like the rhythm breaks up. Like there's a lot you could do, even if it's not hard. It's just really interesting. You can make it to where if you melee an enemy, a little known fact, when enemies go into the frenzy form, they're purple and they cannot be shot, but you can still melee them. So even if there was a full solid chain of moths, you could still melee them around. And then you could start to do stuff like, well, what if you meleeed them and hit them across the room? They broke the chain. That's a really cool idea. What if there were level hazards in the room that if they got knocked into them, it would break the chain? Another cool idea. And those are pretty much things that are already in the game, but you can see just trying to get that scenario to set up that scenario would take a lot of specific focused design. And that's where I thought Patch Quest could really benefit from hand authoring dungeons, leaving the procedural parts to the overworld and having a nice contrast between the two, right? Now, the dungeons could have been tile for tile handcrafted. You could have he added keys to one dungeon. He has various obstacle courses in other dungeons and all these kinds of little things, right? So like, sure, a dungeon is basically a series of like 5 to 10 rooms, screens, and then you fight the boss. So that's a perfect opportunity to hand author it. You could even make the player go like up, down, in a T fashion and have 4 rooms on the 4 corners. You can make it towards a big loop. There's so much you can do with the dungeon layout, but you know, drawing inspiration from Zelda, dungeons have gameplay ideas. They have themes, they have unique enemy elements, they have unique level elements, and they really, in each Zelda dungeon, really, I guess past the first one, but really in each Zelda dungeon, they really play to those elements to really make it feel different. You step into it, like, this dungeon's filled with water. I'm raising and lowering the water level. I have to swim through this area. Like, those are things you don't do anywhere else in any other dungeon, and sometimes anywhere else in the game. So, again, finding stuff about Patch Quest that's already fun and interesting, and then playing that up with level design. You gotta find something to say, like, this is so cool, I want other people to also see it. Like, that's the goal. Some other ideas. A big mini boss, when killed, split into 2 large bosses, and then when those are killed, split into smaller and smaller. So this game already has 4 sizes. 3 sizes with 5 different difficulties associated with them, like strength. So you can make a boss that starts big and gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's pretty awesome. Like, that sounds pretty neat. Really, the bosses as they are now are kind of just normal enemies that are really big, and then they go into a phase where you can't shoot them, and then smaller enemies run in from the side, and that's pretty much every boss encounter except for 1 or 2. So certainly having ideas that are a little bit more unique and a little bit more that encourage other mechanics like meleeing or whatever, like, that is a really good way to flesh out the current design space. Velostrich boss idea. It says a fight where you fight a boss version of the Velostrich, and he runs so fast that he goes off screen and he comes charging in from a different angle that can be conveyed with off-screen indicators. In order to damage him, you have to melee him and stun him, and then open him up for damage with test reaction times and positioning skills. Now that sounds cool. There's a boss in Ex Machina that does something like that.
It's a boss in Mega Man that does something.
Yeah, Overdrive Ostrich. A boss where you have to drag the boss into a space and open it up. Man, so Boktai, right? It's a game that has a real solar sensor, so you can play in sunlight, actual real life sunlight. You charge it, and then when you're out of sunlight or it's nighttime, you have to make do with what you've charged. Your task is to go deep into these castles and catacombs, find the Dracula there, and pull it out into the sunlight and the daylight, and kill it that way. It's so cool that you have to like folded level design, go deep into this dungeon, grab it, and then when you're taking it out, you're just dragging it slowly behind you, and it's a semi-stealth game, so when you're moving slower, you can't evade as easily. It's just a lot of cool ideas there. But that's what this reminds me of, going deep into a place and then dragging it out and having the dragging be fun and interesting. Dead Man's Volley is just a classic Zelda kind of situation where a projectile comes at you and you have to reflect it, and the boss reflects it and you have to reflect it, and you can keep it up as long as possible and hope that you're the one that isn't dead. And then allow the player to melee little swarm creatures. I wrote that earlier today. Cool. So yeah, there are a lot of ideas, but you can see that this discussion is all circling and centering around one reality, right? Patch Quest has a ton of complexity, and yet most of the stuff we are talking about now and suggesting and getting excited about have nothing to do with most of the complexity. And I'll give you a better idea of what that means in a second. But Lemon asked thoughts on a dungeon crawl mode, how to improve roguelike feeling, how to improve Metroidvania feeling. Again, he shared with us some information that super hardcore roguelike players are happy but not super happy, and Metroidvania players are happy but not super happy. And kind of like what Marcus was saying before, like the game draws from these different games, but there are drawbacks, and by mashing them together, there are natural conflicts, and that's probably why roguelike players are like, cool, I see that you have stuff in here for me, but it doesn't quite get there. And so the same with Metroidvania super fans. But yeah, we talked about how to improve dungeons. I added in how to improve co-op. There's lots of ideas to consider. Not going to read them all, but they each address all these different design problems. And some are really simple and some are complex. Some change the games in big ways and some don't. But that's all part of the feedback and the learning experience. So let me give you a taste of how complex this game is. For a twin stick shooter in the same genre as Geometry Wars, the original Geometry Wars at least, having no loadouts, no ammo types, very few or no power-ups whatsoever, unless you count the clear bomb, and just enemies swarming at you. Same genre, you can do a lot with a little, and it's very action-based. This game has player stats here that boost different aspects like your mount skills, your charge blast, your stun melee, a random chance of not taking damage, and your defense. It has an additional set of charms that just boost random things or give you new abilities or passives. Then they have 35 mounts, each with 2 passive abilities, and then 3 attacks, 4 if you count their super attack that's not listed here. And sometimes their defensive ability is also an offensive ability. I'll show you here. Like he flips and then freaking fire comes out, right? Like that's not defense. That's a little of both. Where was I? Yeah. And each of these attacks, and you have patch pins here. These are the things you collect along the way. You have a bunch of different ammo types. You can see on the left there's ammunition. You have 2 different statuses that you hold. You have elemental effects to your attacks like fire, water, whatever. And you have status effects as well, like dizzy, burned. It kind of sounds like a real-time shooty version of Pokemon, and that's kind of what it is, right? It's that complicated, but it's all happening in a very quick and small space. And sometimes you can ignore a lot of the complexity. Sometimes it's really hard to pay attention to all the complexity. especially considering, you know, when a lot of the enemies move the same and there's not a lot of interplay particular, like it's a ton of complexity for, I'll show you the equation again. That's a lot of variables and properties, right? That's a ton. And yet the mechanics are largely unchanged. The mounts give you new attacks, so that's definitely some mechanics in there. The dynamics between them don't change that much, right? It's all just basically shooting bullets at each other and then melee contact damage. So it just plays around with the damage, it plays around with the status effects inflicted, but it's still basically just shooting things and not shooting things. And then likewise, the interplay is about the same as well. You'll have a few new interactions, like my monkey here. I'll show you. My monkey here has Banana Fiend, and eating bananas will energize them. That's the only mount in the game that kind of has a banana specific. So if I see bananas, I'll eat them, and I'll show you. Where am I? So I put that guy to sleep at the top right, so now I can just beat him up. This monkey has the ability to sprout fire, like this. I'm searching for the invisible guy, there he is. He has the ability to make things sleepy, like that. And he has the ability to shoot ninja stars. So that's 2 statuses, 3 different types of attacks. Ninja stars have high cancellation. Where are my bananas? Sleep. I like you can just step on these guys. Bananas, bananas. So this is kind of exactly what we were talking about before. I want to show off one special case, and I have no control over it. Like, bananas are random. I can't get to the right spot. Like, I just want to show them eating banana. Like, I don't even know what part of the level, the world I can go to even get a higher chance of banana spawning. It's just random. And even if it's not random, it's really complicated. So it's hard to kind of... I've been playing this game for 30 hours or whatever. It's hard to... It's hard. When so many things are shifting, it just makes it that much harder to remember. Back to the questions here. Oh yeah, so complexity. The game is really complex. Takes a little bit from Pokemon. I didn't even show you guys the ability to just summon creatures just like that. Like, look, it's my pet. If I land on them perfectly, I inflict a burn status, and when they're burned, their defenses are low. And because I grabbed this little smoky plant, they couldn't see me. So then I just jumped around them all day and then kicked fire into their pants. And if you melee certain things like this, you get extra elemental attacks. Like, just about everything in the game seems to have 1 or 2 layers of complexity. Oh! No, I need that monkey. Cool. 1 or 2 layers of complexity that don't really matter to the... Oh, look, light feet. Look, finally. Oh, look, light feet. If I didn't see that and go out of my way to stand on it, I wouldn't have even shown that aspect. Oh, bananas. Okay, here we go, guys. Here we go. This is what you've all been waiting for. I don't even know how to do it. Eating banana rings will energize his mount. Okay, so does this mean eating? Well, first let's make sure his energy goes lower. At least to 39. Alright, it's interesting. Marcus and I have talked about how to create sort of a real-time Pokemon battle gameplay. And having played Pokemon from the beginning, we know exactly how complex the game is. And even though it's turn-based, you're just racking your brain, just analyzing and piecing through all that complexity to try to make the best move possible. It's a lot. And even though if you're just watching, it seems like nothing's happening, if you're playing the game in your head, there's a lot going on. But that's because the game is incredibly complex. Come on. Maybe I can get hit. I'm gonna get hit. Come on, hit me. There we go, cool. Okay, now I have 35 stamina. Let's see if picking up this banana will do anything. Yeah, see that? Max stamina, I'm glowing. I'm a glowing monkey now. Now my cooldowns are all really fast, so I can just like throw that out and throw out another one, and then throw out another one, and throw out another one. And that was all it was. So imagine complexity like that for every single one of these dudes. Like for example, the monkey likes fruits and bamboos. If I find a piece of bamboo, I think I can walk up to it and eat it. I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, more so than just putting things that you like into a game, more so than just liking games, right? Every single rule, every single piece of complexity you add to a game, increases its potential in some ways and decreases its potential in others. There are consequences, pros and cons, and drawbacks to everything. If I want to make a really clean battle system for Pokemon that's real time, I wouldn't have all the complexity that Pokemon have. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much. It's really a lot for turn-based, but it's certainly too much for real time, right? And it's not just a matter of like, oh, eventually people will memorize it. Oh, eventually people will get it. That affects so many aspects of design, from the readability of the information on the screen, how people learn it, how they enjoy it while they're learning it, and what the top level play looks like compared to, all the tiers below it. All those things are important for a healthy game fan base, community, play experience, all of it. This game also has stackable perks that you can turn on and off. Like, I don't know. I was going to show you guys a run of what this game looked like with no perks. It's just less interesting, right? There's really is not much more going on in the whole game than just moving and shooting. So removing these abilities for you to move and shoot better and faster just doesn't make the game more interesting. Even though these perks I feel like make you overpowered, removing them doesn't add the interesting gameplay again. It doesn't add interplay by removing those. Yeah, so everything from the world map, the randomization, the dungeons, the collectibles. Like this game even has shiny plants, right? This plant right here I'm highlighting, it's a shiny version of the same plant. So just like Pokemon, how they have random shinies, you could find random shinies of every object, I'm imagining, and slowly like complete your super Pokedex, just cause, right? I have 3 shinies. And then treasure, these, you get these for beating the bosses and the major challenges. So to echo a little bit of what we said, the stats here hardly change the strategy. You slowly collect them, you'll slowly get stronger. Evasion, sometimes you'll get hit, but you won't, so that's always like, oh, okay, cool. And everything else, you just get stronger and stronger bullets. Sometimes I pause the game and see which one of these 3 are the biggest, and then I just do that as my strategy. But for the most part, running in a circle and shooting behind you gets the job done, just like immigrants. And when you collect these, at the very beginning of every run, you get a choice of 3 of these kinds of things to pick from. And it's so hard to know which one. I mean, it's random for one, so you might not even have a mount that even takes advantage of that. The cool part about this Pokemon system where you summon a friend is that you can at least take in a mount that does a specific thing. But again, it's another choice that has like no direct effect on the variety, the clarity, and the depth of the gameplay interactions. So overall, when you're playing this game, you're slowly getting used to all these things and slowly learning more and more about these interactions, but they're all individual, right? Learning more about patch pins isn't going to make mounting more interesting. It's not going to make the charms come up with a new combination, really, and it's not going to, these stats aren't going to change any of these other aspects. Maybe if you're really high in ferocity, you'll pick one mount that's really good on offense, but you should always be picking mounts that are good on offense. They almost all have good defense abilities anyway. There's really no trade-offs there. There's no choice to be made. And when you're maneuvering around the map, since it takes you're committed to these paths so much, and backtracking is so empty that you just pretty much go forward and go forward and go forward until you can't anymore. There's no meaningful decision you make navigating the map, except I haven't done pink all the way, so let me just do pink. I haven't done orange all the way, so I'll do orange, assuming, as you should, that there's a boss in every color. And that's just what drives. That's what navigates. Man, this stretch right here was so long. So yeah, balancing a game is more than just making sure that each element works in its own way. And Patch Quest is super polished, right? These menus, as I've said before, are super poppin'. The feedback is really clear, and I love the hover over explanations and everything. Gameplay wise, the feedback is really cluttered. Like, a lot of stuff happens on the screen that it's all very dynamic and overlapping, and you can hardly see what you're doing half the time. But this is an example of one of the most level designy kind of sections in the game. Like, oh look, spike traps. If you're a monkey, you can jump it. Like, it's good to be a monkey in the ninja forest when you're a shinobu ninja, right? You just jump right over and kill people. But then, like, after you're done jumping, you get in these cramped situations. You're like, why is it so cramped? Like, why is it so hard to maneuver here? It's almost as if they just want you to completely just keep jumping and leaving the whole place, and then it's really not worth fighting. All right, this is kind of an example of the level design kind of conflicting with itself. You want to highlight this really cool interaction of certain animals having natural habitats and natural advantages in the environment, but then it's kind of hard. Let me just jump these guys. Oh, so some other ideas I had for gameplay variety was like, how about you promote, even if you don't want to force a player to like do this or that or lose mount ability or whatever, you can just have little extra challenges when the room opens up. Like, hey, try to beat all these guys with just your defensive skill, like I just did, even though I played that really poorly. Like, that's a thing you can do, and then players can choose to accept it or not. There's all kinds of ways to mix up what you have, even with just UI HUD-based encouragement and feedback for doing things a little bit unorthodox and a little bit out of the way. Tons of options, but you really do have to sit down in the game and go, like, what's fun, what's already here, what are players not doing, and why, and that'll get you where you need to be. This is so dangerous without monkey. Come on, monkey. And you just jump over everything. There's spikes in the middle of the field, just hovering there. I'm trying to get him. Oh, he jumped over it. And also, it's like hard to do a jumping effect in top down. It's hard. That's why a lot of people don't do it. Down on my luck. Yeah. So yeah, Patch Quest as a game, there's more content promised, right? You can see update 1, 2, 3, kind of a spoiler. But it's as promised from the Steam page and the YouTube videos that Lemon puts on. So this is kind of what it is. And considering it took 15 plus hours, 20 hours to kind of 100% the game as it is now, and considering that skill-wise, there's not a lot of skill to be had in this game, right? Part of the problem of circling around and shooting behind you as part of a dominant strategy is, 1, it's easy, 2, everybody does it, and 3, is not much else to do but that. Like, I've tried some pretty crazy, like, aggressive strats, and yes, they're hard, they're not really worth it. And that's kind of a balance issue, but ultimately, you play this game a lot, and there's a lot of content here, and when you're done, or before you're done 100% in the game, and even before you kind of potentially beat this final boss, you've pretty much seen everything the game has had to offer. There's not that much variation in any of these corridor tiles. There's not that much variation in the bosses. The first few you play seem different, but then they're all like that. I think this is just a complete game as it is, content-wise. And tweaking what you have is one of the strongest ways to add even more variety rather than adding new content. But nothing stops the new content from taking on new design challenges, new flavors, new modes, new ways of encouraging stuff that the original Patch Quest had potential for but never quite reached. You could even start mixing in more genres. We kind of hinted at this and talked about this tower defense kind of mode where you take your mounts and then you leave them in certain spots and then they're shooting off their abilities and you're trying to stop a whole horde of other mounts and creatures, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do, right? But the basic idea is moving around, going to places and shooting stuff. Like a lot of gameplay games and genres build entire games around that. Some are esports and worthy of thousands of hours of play, and some are really boring and not worth your time at all. So really, the difference is how you design. It's all these individual decisions and realizing that each one of these matters. But yeah, that is mostly the summary I have for Patch Quest. Any final words from anyone about this process, about game design, about shoot 'em ups, anything?
Making games is really hard.
Yeah, no kidding. Like Lemon is really smart, and he did all this by himself from what I can tell. Maybe not music or something, but that's how it goes. And then he worked on this, and I think he taught himself Unity to get this far. And then he had all those different versions, and he's still cranking out YouTube videos, and he's still like working nonstop. And before, he used to tell me like, I have all these features I want to do. I'm like, okay. He's like, I think I'll get them done, and my plan is a month for this, a month for that, whatever. And he just stuck to his schedule. I think his predictions on his own schedule were 100% as far as I could tell. He almost never got behind on the stuff he said. So that's kind of crazy in itself. And then despite all that, right? Despite having a game with this really cool cutesy look and this little charming art style and making your own mini set of Pokemon and having this really, really unique premise, right? On those rare moments that the randomness aligns, Patch Quest twin stick shooting gameplay, the core experience is so good where you're like, I'm thinking like an explorer, I'm thinking like an animal, I'm using the animal's natural habitat, I'm making the right calls, I'm avoiding shooting things all the time. It really has a really cool unique gameplay experience when it all comes together. But those moments were super rare, right? And they were super rare, and they're hard to share with other people. They're hard to describe, and it's hard to kind of recommend people play the game if that's the only thing they're looking for. So, the lower level stuff, if you just like moving around and shooting and colorful animals, that's the core. That's what you're going to get out of Patch Quest no matter what. But that's why it's always a bit of a mixed bag with my feelings. I'm like, ooh, this game has... when you throw in a ton of complexity into a game, there is always going to be a lot of potential. But yeah, therein lies the rub, right? What stays, what goes, and why. And it's so hard to figure out what stays and what goes. He's been working on this game for 5-6 years, maybe 5-6+ years. It's been a long time. And I'm glad it's out now. I'm glad people like it too. Anything else?
Lemon did a great job. I need to play more Patch Quest.
So if we go to my personal list of games that I've played, having played over 1,500 games and kept track of how much I played them for the most part, and I go to design, rank by genre. We can go to the 4DM, 4-directional movement, shmup, or twin stick shooters. And my favorite is Assault Android Cactus, then Nex Machina, then Bangai-O Spirits for the DS, then Hero Core, and then Patch Quest. So Patch Quest, even in its pre-alpha Steam Early Access form, has beaten out Geometry Wars 3 and 2, Pixel Junk Shooter 2, Enter the Gungeon, Exit the Gungeon, Everyday Shooter, Geometry Wars, and Geometry Wars Galaxy. Nice catch. I would have put it above Hero Core, but Hero Core is so clean, right? It just knew exactly what it could do, didn't overstep its boundaries, had just the right amount of enemy types, good boss variety, and wrapped itself all up in a nice package. That's what I'm talking about, right? It's not about the complexity, but man, hitting that, and when I think back on it, I'm like, man, every room was like, yeah, neat, and every boss was like, man, this is clean, this is good, and then the ending was like, yes. So like the little things add up. When you're talking about game design, as long as no one element detracts, the end result is going to be the summation of all your goodness. But when you start adding in elements that have pros and cons, like no matter what, the end result is always going to have those cons there. The pros don't erase the cons, they sit side by side with them. And that's one of the hardest things to sort of stomach when you're working with complex creative projects. But yeah, definitely Patch Quest made it. You could count Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time as a twin-stick shmup. It's pretty good. But we'll leave it there for now. Alright, cool. So thanks for joining us on this recap of the... what is Patch Quest? Patch Quest. Design-oriented game breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it. Stream people out there. This video will be public so everybody can see and watch and hear my thoughts. I believe the spreadsheet will also be public in case you guys want to see the kind of detailed specificity that we apply to game design, both talking about it, designing games, and working with our own team. Best of luck to Lemon. More is coming. If Lemon ever wants to more feedback, we're going to use the same sheet. We're going to return to the same kind of core analysis and elements we have here and just build on top. It's one of the best parts about the game breakdown service. We're going to start something and build on top, and every subsequent consulting session is cheaper and cheaper, so it kind of encourages people to design and then redesign and then keep that conversation going. But if that happens, you'll see it right here on Design Oriented on Twitch or YouTube. But otherwise, we will see you guys next time.
See everybody, y'all.
Bye.